Hello, thank you for coming back to work with us again today. We are doing lesson 3. We're going to make a card case, and I would like to introduce my friend Kathy Romanowski. So today our lesson involves working with oilcloth. It's a linseed coated cotton canvas that will absolutely not move through the feed dogs of a sewing machine without great help. So we've already opened up our kit, and inside of your kit you'll find the same things. You will find oilcloth. It's been cut to our measurements because I wanted to go ahead and mark it inside. So you have a notched marked oilcloth. You have a small piece of oilcloth that has a leather needle in it. So you'll have one leather needle, and you will have 2 pieces of parchment paper. You'll also have a spool of thread, but we went ahead and threaded the machine for you. So let's talk a little bit before we begin about oilcloth. I've already told you that oilcloth is a cotton duck, standard utility fabric, coated with a linseed oil, and then often either laser printed or dyed on top of. This one looks to me like it's printed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about feed dogs. You've noticed when you're sewing that the fabric moves along without you having to pull or push it. That's because every sewing machine has a system of feed dogs. It's a serrated metal that exists here beneath the presser foot, and it moves as the machine stitches to push the fabric along at exactly the pace it needs to sew. Kathy, can you go ahead and manipulate your hand wheel forward and backwards so we can see how it moves? There you go. See how that feed dog goes up and down? That motion pushes the fabric along as the machine sews. So the first tool that we need to work with oilcloth is a leather needle. I have here the package of needles that should be stocked and ready here at the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership Starter Lab. These are universal needles, which mean they sew on most fabrics: cotton, polyester, denim, some stretches. They won't do very well with leather, oilcloth, or vinyl. But something I'd like you to take note of is that on these needles you have different numbers. Those correlate with the sizes of the needles. So as you sew with different fabrics or different materials, you need a different size and a different type of needle. If you can handle the needle correctly, your sewing work can go so much easier. This needle is a leather needle, and I've supplied one. A leather needle is different from a regular needle because the end of the needle is triangular, which means it'll pierce leather, oilcloth, or vinyl, in this case oilcloth, without tearing the fabric. A regular needle will tear your fabric and you'll have little rips along your seam line, whereas with a leather needle, also called a Glover, you will just have very small, concise puncture holes for the thread to go through. Then can you turn this hand wheel towards you so that the needle is in its highest position?
Yep.
Great. Wonderful. Do you remember where the piece is that loosens the needle?
It's right here.
Exactly. And do you turn it towards you or away from you?
Towards.
Perfect. So Kathy is turning this lever towards her. It's a screw. It's designed to function with a screwdriver. I have never used a screwdriver. Now, if I were sewing, I would go ahead and put the sewing machine needle that was in the machine into the little piece of oilcloth that the leather needle was sitting in, just to set it aside so you can put it back in the machine when you're done. And when you put a sewing machine needle into the sewing machine, you always have the flat part of the needle shaft facing to the back. So your needle will look rounded to the front and flat in the back, and that's how it's designed to fit into the hole. People have not sewn with parchment paper before. It's kind of a secret in the industry. It helps your machine to behave when it wants to stick on fabrics. When you work like this, you can use parchment paper. This is simple parchment paper from the grocery store. It's in the aisle where you get your tin foil. You can also use tracing paper from an art supply store. You can also just use regular old-fashioned computer paper. But for these purposes, we like the parchment paper because you can see through it. Kathy, are you ready to prepare your piece for parchment paper?
Yes.
Excellent. Let me let you know, our first seam will be here, and then your second seam will be here. So let's take this first piece of parchment paper. You need enough parchment paper to wrap around your seam. So you need enough parchment paper, maybe a ½ inch extra on either side, but if you could cut, I'm gonna let you feel it, and if you can cut enough parchment paper so that you have what you need for your seam plus an additional ½ inch on either side.
All right. Oh, right there?
Yeah. And then let's go ahead and cut another piece of parchment paper exactly the same size as that piece of parchment paper because we know that the top and the bottom are the same width. Perfect. 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 So let's get a feel for what we're sewing. You've got one piece of oilcloth folded in half, and we are going to want to go ahead and make one seam from here to here with a little tiny back tack here and a little tiny back tack here. But for the oilcloth to go through the machine's feed dog and under the presser foot, we're going to need to go ahead and wrap it in the parchment paper. I like to make a very sharp crease right next to the line that I'm sewing. And I just like to feel, it's good to feel where you're going to be sewing so you have a little bit of control over it when you're under the machine. Do you want to go ahead and play with it for a second?
Sure.
Kathy, can you go ahead and pick your parchment wrapped oilcloth up and put it on the needle plate?
Sure.
Thank you. Let's start at the beginning and let's go ahead and start so that the side of the presser foot lines up with the edge of the fabric so that when you are looking at it, the edge of your presser foot is exactly flush with the edge of the fabric. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you put your presser foot down and with the hand wheel moving towards you, plant your needle.
All right.
Excellent.
Is my presser foot right here?
Exactly, that's the lever.
All right.
Perfect. Now gently. Perfect. So let's go ahead for back stitching. I like to do 3 stitches in and then 3 stitches back and then continue along the line and do the same thing at the end.
Okay. Go ahead.
When you're ready. And you know that reverse is this lever right here.
Okay.
Perfect. That was nice and slow, which is nice when you have to do this. Perfect. You know what? I forgot to point out, we are on stitch length 0.5, which is going to give you the stitch the size of a flea. Let's go ahead and here at the stitch length wheel, let's move this to number 3. I make that mistake every time I sew. I always remember to adjust my stitch length after I've begun. This is a stitch length 3 is very good for work with this kind of material. You don't want your stitches too close together because the thread could tear out. So let's go ahead and just start from where we began. You don't have to back tack again.
Okay.
You can just
keep
stitch
going
the whole way.
forward?
Exactly.
All right.
Perfect. Perfect.
And you feel that pull.
Perfect. And then when you get to the end, you'll go to the end and then you do 3 stitches back. Perfect. Okay, go ahead and lift your needle up to its highest position. Perfect. Lift your presser foot lever and remove your piece. Perfect. Go ahead and cut it here on the thread cutter on the side of the machine. Kathy, that's wonderful. All right, Kathy, are you ready to sew the bottom half?
Yes.
Wonderful. Can you do exactly what you did on the top seam, but at the bottom?
I think so.
Wonderful. Is there something different between the two?
The top and the bottom?
Uh-huh.
This is folded.
Exactly. The top was 2 pieces separate from one another. The bottom is folded, but it'll sew exactly the same.
Just like that?
Exactly.
Right. And then we're gonna line it up again?
We are going to line it flush to the side with the presser foot, yes. I would tend to hold the thread with your left hand before you plant your needle. So with the left hand, I would just very, very, very gently put my finger down.
Like this?
Exactly. And once your presser foot is lowered, go ahead and lower your presser foot. There you go. Now before you plant your needle, go ahead and hold it exactly. Now with your right hand, move the wheel towards you because it's your friend and plant your needle.
Like that?
Perfect. Perfect.
All right. Now we're gonna go ahead and do our 3 forward and 3 backward?
Exactly.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right, and then the presser foot?
Up.
All right.
Needle up. And trim your threads. Okay, Kathy, your stitches look great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did great. Do you want to go ahead and trim up your threads? Just go ahead and give them a little snip right next to the paper.
Sure. Nice and close?
Uh-huh, nice and close front and back. Perfect. So let's go ahead and flip this over, and I want you literally to rip the parchment off.
Like opening a present.
Like opening a present. So do you notice how it stitches right, or it rips right around the seam?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to use a very thin, somewhat see-through paper when using it to stitch with. Looks really good.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So I went ahead and put notches into this fabric before I put it into your kit. And let's talk a little tiny bit about how notches work. I'm not giving you a very good example. You don't really want your notches to be big because you don't want them to get in the way of your piece. But you do need enough of a marking so you know where to start or stop your seam, or where to fold a piece. Notches in sewing are used for absolutely everything. Anytime you make a pattern, when you put 2 pieces of fabric together, you want a notch that marks this is where they meet and this is where they should be sewn together. Notches also serve, these notches are serving not only to show us how to align the fabric, but these notches are also going to show us where do you fold the fabric to create the little pouches for your card. Notice the notches here, the fold is here. The notch marks for you where to fold your fabric. So, Kathy, I'm going to give this to you and let you find the notches.
Okay, just for future reference, how did you make the notches? Did you measure them out?
Very, very, very good question. Every pattern is done on a grid of inches, unless it's a European pattern, and then it'll be done on a grid of millimeters and centimeters. But I work in inches, so on this grid of inches, I use the same measurement for this notch as I do for this notch, because that's going to tell us to fold it here and here. And I believe, I want to say it's 1 5/8 inches. Yeah, notches are based on measurements. That's a great question.
So go ahead and fold it? Or just...
Absolutely. Or if you just want to familiarize yourself with where the notches are.
Okay. These two.
You are a lot quicker at this than I was.
Yeah.
I made the pattern last night and struggled with it so much. You've got this down pat. So actually, that's kind of fun. You know, you can do it either way. I designed this, well, here, let me show you what I have. I designed this card holder to work like this, like a little tiny card case where you put the cards on the inside, but you started playing with it in a way that I thought was kind of fun. If you'd like to, we could also make a card holder that we could stitch the sides closed. It doesn't open or close. Your cards go here and here, and then you have a little center pouch here. It's really up to you how we sew it.
I just love this pattern, though.
Okay.
I think I have to go with the way you made it.
The original.
Just because it's pretty.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, so Kathy, did you kind of feel your way around where the notches are and how this folds?
Yes.
Excellent.
So I'm going to go right here. Right here.
Exactly.
And then the one in the middle?
Exactly.
All right.
So what I would do with your piece is I wouldn't worry about this little gaping. For some reason it did the same thing with me and mine all flattened out. I would just fold notch to notch. Make sure that you're notch to notch when you fold. Fold, notch to notch. Push your extra fabric down so that you're not gaping too much. It's just kind of a funny thing about this fabric. You just have to work with it. And then give it a nice strong crease along the end. Perfect. And do the same thing there. Get a nice strong fold from the notch to the notch. Exactly.
Oh yeah, that did really decrease
Yeah.
in the middle.
You just kind of work it down with your fingers. It's funny, when you're working with hard to work with fabrics, a lot of times you just sort of make them do what you want them to do. Exactly. If you push it down into the pocket, it
Do this
won't
one as
be
well?
Yeah. And then you fold that. That'll be your center fold.
Right.
So, just push your creases into place.
All right. What do you think?
I think that looks great.
All right.
All right, so something I want to point out before we do our final seams, there are certain materials that are just hard to work with, and oilcloth is just a little bit hard to work with. So this was something Kathy did really well. Before you fold your seam up, push it so it's nice and tight to itself. And I would push any excess down towards the pocket because it'll fold over and capture the excess. So you have a nice flat finished piece. So there's your fold. Kathy, if you could fold your other piece into place.
Sure.
I'll hold this one. Very good. Now I'll hold this in place. Now go ahead and measure out how much parchment you would need to cover this entire length for your seam. It's like playing Twister with our hands.
Do you think I should cut it like that?
Yeah, you want a little 1/2 inch extra on either side.
Let's there.
Perfect. And you'll cut 2 of those because you're going to have 1 on each side.
Okay.
Perfect.
Right here?
So, yep.
All right.
I'm going to let go.
Should we fold it?
I had a hard time with this last night, so I'm kind of babying you, but I know you can do it. All you want to do, your aim is to make one seam that's exactly like the seam you did at top and at bottom along the side. You won't fold it until the piece is finished. So you want one straight seam to go from the top to the bottom. So with your folds in place and nice and straight, you want to wrap the parchment around your seam and get a nice tight crease.
If it was really difficult, would you ever use pins or would that just make holes?
Not pins, but you know something you can use are, this is going to sound funny, I have used everything. I've used those little binder clips to hold it in place. Anything that doesn't pierce, once you pierce oilcloth, the hole doesn't go away. So So you don't want to pin it, but you can use double-sided tape. You can use a binder clip, or you can use it's not a staple, what's the...
A paper clip.
Boom. You can use a paper clip. It's really, when you're doing this, we've designed this. This doesn't exist in the world. This is the only one of these that exists in the world. And when you're working on your prototypes, you're going to be working on something that doesn't exist in the world. So how you get to finished product is often a journey of trial and error, and using things, much like kitchen parchment paper, that you wouldn't really expect to use in other ways. So if you're having a hard time with this, you really could get a paper clip. Why that word is escaping me is funny. You could put a paper clip here, you could put a paper clip here, a paper clip here, and a paper clip here, and just remove them as you begin to sew. You don't want to sew over a paper clip, but you could certainly put it there to put it in place. Do you feel like you might like some paper clips, or do you feel like you're feeling okay with this as it is?
I think it's a great idea. I think we could definitely move forward. I feel like our folds are pretty nice and strong.
They're pretty nice and strong. You did a very good job of getting the folds nice and flat. And that is something moving forward as you do this on your own. Before starting sewing, you really want to go ahead and get these creases nice and flat and get the fold in place. You did a great job with this. Okay, are you ready to sew?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Okay, so Kathy, can you go ahead and sew that side seam exactly like you sewed the top and bottom seams?
Start with this one right here?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a good idea to leave the one piece of parchment off so that you're only focusing on the seam you're going to make. And this one will need that back stitch at the beginning again. So you go 3 stitches in, and then 3 stitches back, and then continue. Perfect. That was a good reminder, is to hold your thread in place as you plant your needle, because sometimes the thread likes to come running out of the sewing machine needle.
That could be messy.
Perfect. Perfect. And try to make sure you can sew onto the parchment paper alone. Make sure you cover it. Make sure you cover the very edge of your piece.
Think we should go back a little?
Yeah, it can't hurt.
Okay. That?
Yeah, I think that's great.
And why do we backstitch?
It adds strength. It actually locks your stitch in place. And when you cross over your flap, you might give it a little backstitch to give it a little extra strength there, right at that line.
Oh yeah, I felt that.
Yeah, just go ahead, and when you get to the edge of your fold, there you go. That'll just make it so that it doesn't tear out when you're putting cards in it, or maybe a little bit of paper or money or whatever. Well, that's good. Now go ahead and check your placement. Make sure that your parchment is still flush to the side of the piece and that your fold is in the right place. Sometimes it's nice to stop and readjust.
Yeah. How would I do that?
I just go ahead and I kind of feel it. I take a look and make sure that my notch is still where it wants to be and that the fold is straight, and make sure that the paper is pushed over nice and tight, and then I continue. I like to stop mid-seam and just kind of adjust as I go along. I might actually guide it out a little bit this way so you're closer to the edge. There you go.
Okay. So just move a little bit in this direction?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to pick it out. Just kind of guide it back out to the side of the fabric.
Like that?
Exactly.
All right, and then go straight?
Yep, straight down.
I think maybe go back a little over that?
Yeah, give it a back stitch.
Okay.
Very good. Now let's take a look here for students. You might be a little tiny bit far in. You really want your presser foot to be lined up with the side of the fabric. I do not think this is gonna alter the function of this piece, but if this piece were measured down to the 1/8 of an inch, that precision was necessary down to the 1/8 of an inch, you'd probably want to start again. I don't think that I designed this pattern to be precise to the 1/8 of an inch. I think you have a little room to float off. But on the next seam, definitely keep your eye, you never want to keep your eye on the needle. Always keep your eye where you want the machine to land. So I would keep my eye on the side of the presser foot and on the edge of the fabric to make a nice straight line.
Okay.
Perfect. But you can take this one out
All right.
and we'll start the next stitch. Press your foot down. Exactly. Put your left hand on the thread before you plant your needle. Your left hand on the thread. Exactly. And then go ahead and plant your needle. Just hold that in place while you plant your needle. Perfect. And then once the needle's planted, you can release. Good. Perfect. You're doing great with the alignment of the presser foot. That looks very good.
Thanks.
And don't forget to backstitch when you get to your little... Oh, you're on the back side. Okay, just keep
Yeah,
going.
I can't
Actually, you're
feel
good.
it as
Yeah.
much on the side.
I would just keep going then.
Maybe move a little bit over.
I would. Yeah, there you go. That's good. I actually like the way you're playing with it because it shows that you can just sort of play with adjusting where it goes. So I like that. Perfect.
Right.
And voila.
Woohoo.
Perfection. Okay, Kathy, I am completely impressed with what you've done here. It was very hard, I know, to sew over the multiple layers of oilcloth with parchment, but you did a great job.
Hey.
You're welcome, thank you. Would you like to trim up your stitches and pull off your parchment?
I would love to.
Good.
But I just have to ask, as a beginner, I really feel like when I do that back stitch, I feel like it just throws me off a little bit and my stitches become a little wobbly. What do you think?
You know, that takes me back to when I was learning to sew, and I'm going to go ahead and say I probably felt the same thing that you feel. I think that's really natural to just getting used to anything. And I suggest in learning how to sew, just like in learning how to do anything, that the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. So I think in the beginning, anything is going to make you feel like your stitches wobble. But as you practice, you will have an instinct to get better, straighter stitches. I think you did a great job. This is not an easy one. It is not an easy one at all. And, you know, it's just, I mean, it goes back to the old saying, practice makes perfect. It's just, you want to get the sense, once you've done it enough, you won't really be controlling the machine anymore. It just happens through you. You stop thinking and your hands just know what they're doing. So if you're interested in this, you'll get there. But I think you did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, let's take the parchment off and see what you got.
I'm excited.
I have to say, I'm seeing it right now. I made my first prototype of this last night in my studio. Your first piece did better than my first piece as far as the way that the oilcloth is behaving. My
Really?
oilcloth was really lumpy. And
Were you tired?
I think I was tired.
Okay.
but my oilcloth was really lumpy, and yours is I will say, you know, I would practice this a few more times before taking yours to market because you would want to get the stitches a little bit straighter. I will say that. But it's something to get used to, and I think you did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
You are very welcome. So go ahead and find that center notch and fold it in half. Press it nice and tight. And you have a card case. Thanks for joining us for Lesson 3 at the Prototype Series at the Starter Lab at Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership. I hope we see you at Session 4.